Welcome to It's Marketing's Fault, the podcast where we discuss how to do marketing the right way. I'm your host, Eric Rutherford, and hey, I am thrilled today because I have with me Mickey Kennedy. He is the founder and president of eReleases, the small business leader for press release distribution, which is now celebrating 25 years in business. He is an expert at helping small businesses increase their visibility and credibility. Mickey, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. Now, as we kind of jump into this, I have to ask, do press releases even matter in today's social media landscape? I mean, won't people hear things new, about the new things about my business anyway through other channels?
It's possible, but it's also unlikely. A lot of small businesses don't have a large enough um, social media following to really reach the right influencers and people. Uh, but they're the Newswire, who we work with, PR Newswire, does reach influencers. They're given journalist access, just like other bloggers and influencers of different types. And I follow someone on TikTok called Snackalator, who each week does a roundup of new snacks hitting the grocery shelves. And all of his images, he says, he pulls from press releases. And to rely on organic social reach, doing the job, it would just be too much work for someone like that. So it's good to have one place where you can just go and pull down and look. And we're fortunate, in the U.S. I say fortunate and unfortunate, because we basically have a duopoly of newswires, of press releases. It's Business Wire and PR Newswire, with PR Newswire being the oldest and largest, and that's who we work with. The good reason is it's fewer places for journalists to have to go. It also means that if you use one of those, most journalists will see you or at least skim you. The downside of it is, with the duopoly, is you're paying more, and the newswires aren't cheap, as a result.
Okay, you have sold me right there. As you have shared that information in terms of distribution, in terms of getting information out. Let's just jump in then with e-releases, because there's more questions I want to ask you regarding even what you just shared about the duopoly, about the news wires. But let's jump into e-releases first. I got a feeling we're gonna flesh that out there in more detail. So, what is e-releases?
Right. So eReleases is a press release distribution platform. We launched a little over 25 years ago. In my previous job before that, I was hired by a telecom research startup as employee three. I had a creative writing background. I had just finished an MFA in creative writing, with an emphasis in poetry. But all they saw was writing, and they said, write press releases and figure out what the media wants. And I would, write these releases and fax them, and initially not much happened, and I sort of like realized that what the journalists are really looking for is a story, and we were publishing a lot of data. So I would internally look at anomalies in our data, like, hey, this is interesting. This company's, telecom traffic has jumped 20%, in the past year. Why is that? Or, hey, there's this one Caribbean country that is creating more inbound and outbound traffic to the US than all other Caribbean countries combined. What's going on there? And at the time, it was the center for 1-900 numbers, which were really popular, I guess, 27 years ago. Everything from astrology to, predictions. It was all over the place, for 1-900 numbers. And, I would write these releases, send them out, and all of a sudden now we were getting picked up. The Economist, Financial Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, all the telecom trade publications. We were just generating lots of buzz, lots of sales, lots of industry recognition. And, at that startup, we were publishing our annual book of data for $600 at the time. And that business is still around, and today they charge for one person's access to the data. It's electronic now over the internet. It's $30,000 a year. And so, I don't think that they could be asking that much if, they didn't have really, really great recognition throughout the industry, and this respect and credibility as having this really amazing data. And it's a really great position for them to be in.
Wow. Oh my word. That is amazing. Um, both in how you got into it, what e-release is, kind of where it stemmed from. Just as a total aside, I also worked at a small telecom company 25 years ago, so I remember the feeling. We're doing long distance, doing local, all that good stuff. So it brings back memories.
It was the wild, wild west of mergers and 10 cent a minute dialing and all kinds of just crazy offers and fun advertising. It was a wild time.
It truly was. Yeah, it's so hard now when, especially whether it's when I talk with my kids or when I talk with people who are younger, who have never experienced long distance, in terms of per minute and the long distance wars. So that's just a flashback that is so fun to revisit. Um, Let me ask. So it sounds like you were able to put press releases for your customers, get them to the news wires. Is it visibility that you solve for your customers? Is it storytelling? I'd love to hear that, because I love the storytelling aspect as well. How do you solve this conundrum for your customers?
Sure. So, e-releases is basically a platform. When I started, I was just emailing releases to people. Um, as I was faxing, more and more journalists were saying, "Could you email in the future?" And it's so much easier to just create a list and hit send. So that was the light bulb moment for starting e-releases. I spent about a year or two contacting journalists and asking them if I could put them in my database and send them releases. And they all asked, "How much is this going to cost me?" And I said, "It's free." And they're like, "Yes, sign me up." Now, uh, journalist inboxes are just overloaded with spam. There are several media database companies out there, and there are a lot of people who say, "Hey, I just paid X dollars for this database." It could be as high as $16,000 for yearly access to these databases, and they're just like, I could just send it to a very small group, but I paid for the whole database. They just blast it to really large numbers. They're like, everybody in business and banking, sure, they might be interested in my telecom release or learning more, or, they have these ways of explaining it to themselves that, sending non-banking news to banking journalists is somehow going to be a benefit. It doesn't cost them anything more. But, the end result is journalists, their inboxes are just overloaded and glutted now. And so that it really is hard to stand out with even email pitches from PR firms. That's why most PR firms, or a lot of them, still do phone pitching, which journalists don't like to be interrupted constantly with phone calls. But it is one of the ways to cut through the email. And I think that because of that, I was very fortunate that PR Newswire approached me well over a decade ago and said, "Hey, we'd love to partner with you. We like what you're doing for entrepreneurs and small businesses. We don't service them, and we would never tell our salespeople to go out and land as a small business client. The average client that their salespeople are looking for, they're hoping are $20,000 to $40,000 a year in newswire fees. Like, yeah, sign me up for a 20-some thousand-dollar newsroom, and add a global distribution for $10,000 and things like that." So that's what their time is spent, and they like that I represented so many smaller businesses that they normally wouldn't work with. And uh, so all of our releases that go out get a national distribution over the wire. PR Newswire charges over $1,600 for a 600-word press release, and you don't have to pay anything close to that using us. Um, the downside is if you're looking for that global distribution, you're not going to get it through e-releases. We're just focused on national. We do offer local saturation, reaching journalists who are tagged as only interested in local news. And also you can reach the appropriate trade and industry publications and people who cover those industries.
Okay, so then it sounds like very much national in terms of the U.S., in terms of your customers and who you're able to get them in front of. You also mentioned, though, especially this idea of storytelling. Would you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I know when I think of press release, storytelling does not immediately come to mind, and so I'm guessing if that's true for me, it's got to be true for some other listeners. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Right. So when someone issues a release and it goes over the wire, the goal that we're looking for is earned media. And that's when a journalist takes the elements in the press release and they draft and write an article. We're looking for original articles to be written about us. And there is something that happens called syndication, where the press release itself shows up on a few websites. That's nothing to be excited about, yet it's created a whole cottage industry of people who only focus on that. I mentioned there's only two newswires of press releases in the U.S., Business Wire and PR Newswire. There are dozens and dozens of websites with wire in their name that are not wires. They are syndicators of the press release. And so you pay a fee and the release gets on maybe a couple hundred websites. There are locations on the websites that don't matter. You can't organically reach those in most cases. If you do a search in Google Web or Google News, you're not going to find these, and no one's looking at them. And a journalist is never going to write an article based on that because it never reached a journalist. And so there's a lot of education in our market. We every day we get, why would I pay this if I can go to XYZ Wire for $69? And I'm like, well, we're about earned media. They're not. They're very, clear that they're just a syndication outfit, and maybe less clear now because a lot of them have removed language saying we don't reach journalists, we're just syndication. So yeah, maybe it is a little muddled now, and unfortunately, if you want to reach journalists, you're going to either have to use a PR firm or a newswire, and PR firms do both. They do pitching and then they also issue stuff over the wire as well. So my belief is that if you have newsworthy press releases that are story ready, you can definitely engage the media and get that earned media. It's not easy. There are people that come to us quite often who spent $40,000 on a 1-year campaign with a PR firm, and they got no earned media. Despite that, I do provide a lot of training and lessons that I've learned and things that I see with my customers, because we move over 10,000 releases a year. I kind of see what works and what doesn't work. And, I get all these press releases for product launches, and it's like, here's our product, here's a list of features. And I mentioned that journalists like stories. It's really hard to craft a story around that. Elements that you could add to that release that would make it more worthy of a story arc would be a use case study. Someone who beta tested it. What were the results that they saw? Why is this important? And maybe a quote by them. And then you also have the features, and then you have a page to the product. All of a sudden, that's a lot more information for a journalist to craft a story arc of like, hey, here's a product. You put in there that 67% of people in your industry fail in the first 5 years of business because of this issue. The stakes are really there, and so the reader is lulled into that. And then you talk about this one particular client. Maybe they implemented the product and they saw like a 32% reduction in logistics cost or whatever the product aimed to solve, and then they have a quote by them, and all of a sudden that is a lot more information and more of a story And if you're a journalist who is sort of like a gatekeeper of their audience, you realize that this story fulfills more of what your audience is looking for. And that's one of the most important elements. The most common release that we get at e-releases is probably a personnel change, and then second is the product launch. Personnel changes rarely ever get media attention, unless it's a new executive or a major industry veteran who's coming on board. you know just because you hired Sam as an associate in HR, you really shouldn't spend money going over a wire with something like that. You would be better served by just sending it to your local paper, your local business magazine or newspaper, if you're lucky enough to have one of those. And then maybe a trade publication or two that often have like an on the move section where they put like a little photo and two sentences. And yeah, that's probably best case scenario for those types of releases.
I appreciate that context because I think a lot of people think everything is newsworthy, or at least it is to them. It's there is um, that feeling of, oh, this is significant or this is important, this product's important, this service is important, we made a new hire. But really it sounds like small businesses need to get into that mindset of, okay, it's not really about me, it's all about the journalists who will then take this information and do something with it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, something that's really important to you, let's say you discovered the cure for cancer. By just saying, I've discovered the cure for cancer, click here to buy, it's not going to pass the smell test with any journalist. They're not going to cover it. It's really important to you. You feel like this is the biggest change in the world, but what are things that you could add to that would be meaningful? One is the context of who you are. uh, you know what what makes you important. Are you a medical researcher, or are have what is your story? And adding that. And then what are what kind of studies have been done proving that there is some efficacy with this? And getting maybe some quotes from people in the medical field talking about this product and the results of your study. And all of a sudden you're layering credibility, but you're also creating more elements of a story. And what is important to you could be newsworthy, but often you have to really go back to that press release and start putting elements in there that really make it more aware and more credible to the media. Like you have to sort of pitch who you are and why. If you're selling something or something that's radical or really important, communicate why it's important. Get publicly available data out there that shows the problem. I mentioned that the one about a certain percentage of businesses fail in the first 5 years because of this problem. That's a really great number, and it probably is out there. There's lots of numbers and data that are out there that are publicly available, and you putting them in a release really anchors it and shows the stakes to a potential audience. Journalists are really looking for what is going to educate their audience or entertain them, or in some cases really just delight them. And you really have to make sure that you're providing those elements in a press release, and ideally in a way that is more elements of a story. If you look at Shark Tank, it's no coincidence that almost everybody that appears, one of the first things they do is they talk about who they are and what their story is, and their story behind either launching the company or the product or the service. And it's a way to provide some authenticity. Sometimes they're sharing something that's inspirational or vulnerability, like maybe they lost a spouse or a family member, maybe they had a hobby, and all of a sudden they're stuck with being a sole provider, and they're wondering, could I make a business around this hobby? And the reason that works so well is personal stories help to humanize, and they really give a human interest element. Going back to that whole story thing. People want to do business with people, not logos and products and corporations. And so anything you can do to sort of humanize you and pull those threads of a narrative in, certainly gives you potential angles to work with.
I like that humanization of the whole process. And I think it sounds like too, it's really easy to assume that journalists will pick up on why things are important or how things are important just with straight facts. It's at least from a business standpoint, from the business side. It sounds like very much what you're saying is, don't make that assumption. You want to make it easy on the journalists to be able to write their own story and engage with their own audiences with the information you provide.
Yeah, absolutely. There's there's so many ways of sort of approaching the media and the idea of press releases, but one of the most important things is I think working from a story standpoint, making sure you have a lot of necessary elements for a journalist to work with, even when you're publishing, you know, core data, like I was at Telegeography, the telecom research firm I was working at, putting the story in there, like, hey, here's this interesting anomaly with data, and here's why. And, then providing a quote from the company in regards to that, lends itself an authority. Most of those quotes get included when they write an article. So I always tell people, spend a little extra time on the quote. Uh, Make it so that if they paraphrased what was said in the quote, there'd be a loss there. They'd be like, "Ugh, I really want to put that quote back in there." And so sometimes a really great quote could be, the being a wordsmith and how you said it, but it also could be the authority or your gift of concision of really just striking through and telling something. Could also be controversial. If you have a contrarian viewpoint, they're certainly not going to just publish that as fact and paraphrase it. They're going to want to, link it to someone. So you're the out if it bothers anyone. So I always tell people, being a contrarian is a great way to get media attention, because journalists like to cover both sides of a story. And if there's a story that's really just getting a lot of miles in your industry, whether it's like, uh, everybody moving to electric cars, and it seems to be the hot issue. If you're the one contrarian out there saying, not so fast, these cars catch on fire, and sometimes it takes 30, 40,000 gallons of water to put them out. And, most fire departments aren't equipped for that. And also, what are we going to do with these batteries at the end of their life? We haven't really solved that, as well as the mining environmental issues. And, if you provide a contrarian viewpoint that's level-headed, not going to alienate you with your customer base, it's a really great way to be plugged into every article and story, because very few people are out there pointing out the negative. And so they can just plug you into every story that talks about it, because you're the one person raising your hand saying, hey, I'm the contrarian on this topic. And that's a really great way, I think, to get some attention out there. Another thing that works, I'd mentioned data is really good. You controlling the data, you putting the data out. You don't have to create a research firm like where I worked at before, but you could do a study in your industry. Maybe pick 16 hot button questions. Brainstorm with other people, like saying, hey, if you could ask our industry right now, anything, what are some questions you'd want to ask if you were going to a conference or a trade show, next week? What would you want to, pull someone aside and just ask, hey, have you noticed this going on in our industry? Those could potentially be really great questions to ask. Also, we're post pandemic. People are always talking about cultural issues, people wanting to still work from home. Maybe questions about something like that would be a good, safe thing to put in there. Maybe asking about people's spending over the next quarter or two could potentially point towards, economic growth or potential downturn. There's lots of little things. So just make sure you sort of brainstorm, spend a lot of time asking the questions because that's the most important aspect of a survey. Um, you know, then putting it in a Survey Monkey takes like less than 15 minutes. I like 4 questions per page, 4-page questionnaire. Take that link that you get and then just approach a small or independent trade association in your industry. There are probably dozens, if not hundreds, in your industry, and you're just not aware of it. Everybody knows the big trade association. Stay away from them. They don't like to cooperate. They get lots of media attention on their own. But if you approach one that's got like 1,200 members and maybe they're like, the Mid-Atlantic section, or maybe they represent people of a certain age or, demographic. There's so many different little of these trade associations that are out there. And, pick one. I usually like 800 or more members. We're looking for at least 100 responses. Ask them if they'll send that link to their members, ideally through email as well as social media. And tell them that in exchange for that, you'll mention them in the press release you'll be issuing over the wire. The small and independent trade associations don't get any media attention. So they'll see this as a win-win. I've had a couple go back to my clients and ask if they could co-brand the survey. I don't see a downside to it. It's a little more visibility for them. It really doesn't hurt you. Maybe aligning yourself more with them will actually be seen as a better indicator of you as an authority. So you get the survey results, you analyze them, and you're just going to focus on 2 or 3 of the ones that you felt were the biggest surprises or the most important questions. And you're going to write a press release about that. You're going to put a quote in there by you as to why you felt the numbers skewed a particular way. You're the expert. You did the survey. And then you're going to issue that over the wire. I do recommend that you build out a page on your website where you put all 16 questions and responses, because sometimes a really clever journalist can go there and fish out a second or third story. And, that could potentially be another press release you could do if it seems like something that you didn't initially think of. And you're like, wow, that is a really good take on that question. And so you can then put that in there, put another quote on to this issue and send that out. On average, when I coach clients through this, they often receive 8 to 14 earned media articles, and the least we've ever seen is 4. And like I said, I've had clients who spent $20,000 to $40,000 and got no earned media. So here's one thing that you can do. It's a little more involved, but I broke down the process. It's not a huge effort, and in most cases, 2/3 of the time, the first trade association you approach will say yes. Maybe you have to go to a second, but there's just so many out there that you can approach and use their audience for the survey. And I think that that's a really great win for people. It really establishes you as an authority. And just getting earned media in general sort of establishes you as authority. It's a huge credibility indicator, and it's why so many startups focus on earned media over paid clicks and things like that, because they're really trying to establish themselves as a company that has authority, creating a signal of trust, and then being able to use that signal of trust to then amplify it with paid advertising later down the road.
So that sounds amazing, and that has given me so much context and more information. Then, so it sounds like the earned media would, just for everybody listening, just to make sure we're tracking with that term and thinking of it in the same context. How would you define earned media?
Earned media is when a human has written about you, and it may be based off of a press release. Sometimes people just get earned media all the time. Like, I know that, when the high school wins the state championship, there's usually an article there, and that article is earned media. A journalist wrote about you. They didn't copy and paste your press release and publish it. It's not, a version of your release on a website. It's actually, handwritten. And the reason that's important is people recognize articles. When someone comes across an ad, their blinders go up, and even if they click through, the conversion rate could be 1, 2, 3, 5%. And, but when they read an article, they get this warm feeling. There's this authority that's created by, someone wrote about it. They often want to do business with that entity. I'm guilty of it. I've read articles about Kickstarter campaigns. They're like really sharing the story, who this person is, and what they've identified as a need, and they're working on this product. And I click through, and I often look at the price, and it's like, yeah, I can support them. Whether it happens or not, that's the chance you take. But that upswell of feeling great and excited and wanting to work with them, is there. I'm not looking to price shop. Is there something that's a little bit different or similar that I could get cheaper on Amazon? None of that happens. It really is this great rapport that is created, and excitement. And I had a client just a couple of weeks ago say, hey, this article generated like 300 visitors to our page, and it looks like almost 200 of them bought. Is that possible? And I'm like, it is, because not everybody who read the article clicked through, but those that did and had that feeling and clicked through, with your price point, they were a consumer product and pretty affordable. It's just like, oh, click and buy, and it's done. And so, yeah, it is possible. They're like, yeah, our best landing page has never done over like 8%. And here it's like well over 50% of the people bought. And I'm just like, yeah, it's a different thing, earned media. Because of that, I think that, when you do get earned media, you want to use it, take screenshots of it, because, articles can disappear. Newspapers in particular change their CMS every 6 to 12 years. And often they will just, rather than port everything into this new content management system, they'll just purge it and start over. And so, and some people just drop stuff off after a certain period of time. So, make sure you've got screenshots of it, you've recorded it, take the link, share it with your social media, share it with your newsletters, and share it with your leads. And your customers. Your customers are important because there's always churn, and there's always people who are like, we've used them for a couple of years. Maybe we should try someone else just to see if we're using the right company. They read that article, they get that upswell of feeling good about you. They're like, we're good with them. We don't have to shop this year. And also with leads, I don't know what percentage of conversion you have with your leads, but it's not unusual for people to have like 80% of their leads are just not going to convert. And maybe getting this earned media in front of them, and some of them read it and they do convert. So, those are just, found sales that weren't going to go your way. When they were weighing things, they were like, we got to 49%, but we never got over the hump. We never got over to 51% and decided on them. And maybe this earned media will create that warmth and that energy and excitement and get them to convert. I had a local carpet company in New Jersey come to me once and said, we have a budget for a 1-year PR campaign, one press release a month. And I said, I don't think this is going to work for you. You're a local carpet company. After talking with them, I realized they're not doing anything really majorly different than anybody else. And I just didn't know how to crack that nut. And so they said, well, we've got the budget, and we're, it's already been appropriated. It's just going to be lost. If we don't give it to you, we're going to give it to someone else. So I worked with them on month 5. We did 4 releases that generated nothing. I asked them a series of questions, one of which was, who is their biggest enemy? I expected it was like Stan across the street, with his little carpet company, but they were like, no, it's the big box home improvement stores. And let me tell you why they're so bad for the carpet industry. And I was like, ooh, I like this. And I was like, let's do a release on this. It was sort of a David versus Goliath approach, talking about local carpet companies and how they have to compete against these, billion-dollar big box home improvement stores, who often will have people install carpets. sometimes who've never installed carpets before. They call a list of people who are approved and licensed in the state for home improvement, and they say, hey, we've got a carpet install available tomorrow at 11. And if you're a roofer and you don't have a job tomorrow, maybe you're going to YouTube tonight and you're going to figure out how to do carpet in the morning. And that happens according to my client. They said that they are often coming into houses that got carpet 6 years ago from the big box home improvement stores, and they don't know why it didn't last. And they look at it and they say, there's nothing wrong with the carpet. The padding is terrible. The carpets weren't stretched. The seams are visible and they weren't done properly. And at that point, taking it up and trying to reuse the carpet, it's sort of a lost cause if you have to do the padding. And it's just a waste. And, they said, it's malpractice in a sense. And so we sent that out. It got picked up by a dozen trade publications right off the bat. And the first thing I said was, hey, the people reading these are the carpet companies. They're not your customers. And they were like, no, we this is good. We want this. What else can we do? We want this. So we continued to milk that. Talking about challenges, talking about marketing in particular. Turns out that was what I call a gap in the industry, or a blind spot, where the trade publications weren't talking about this, and we were bringing these things to light, and they were running with it. They loved it. And so at the end of a year, we got them in their local newspaper. We got them in New Jersey Magazine, but we also got them in over 20 trade publications, maybe close to 24. And so they put all of these clippings, they printed them all out, saved them. And every time they go into a home, they give their quote, and then they show them saying, hey, look, we may not come in as the cheapest, but we've been around. We almost never have to come in and restretch a carpet or replace the carpet because the seam is visible. We stand on the fact that we've been here for X number of years. All of our employees are salaried. And here you can see we've been in Floor Trade Weekly. Here we've been in this publication, local newspaper, New Jersey Magazine. They said they probably adds about a minute and a half just skimming lightly through the book in their sales presentation. And they started converting between 14 and 17% more of those home consultations, just adding that, what they call a brag book. And, that sort of just shows that having that almost as a prop, this earned media really demands a lot of respect by people. And if someone's looking and saying, hey, we're spending a lot of money here, and this guy's a couple $100 more, or well within reason, I think we should go with them. They're industry recognized. They've been in the local paper. They're not a fly by night. I feel very comfortable letting them into my house. And so it really does help the whole sales conversion process using earned media.
Wow. I had no idea of the credibility that this adds with the earned media as it gets picked up, as it just appears anywhere. And I say anywhere and everywhere, but in inappropriate places. It's not like it's just being skimmed on Twitter. It's appearing in incredible sources that suddenly boost the overall validity, credibility of the business and the service and everything else. I didn't realize the extent that it made that difference.
Yeah, a lot of people years ago started adding testimonials, and I think that there's a thing where there's just testimonial fatigue, where people don't necessarily trust the testimonials, or they've kind of realized that even the worst of restaurants get a few favorable reviews, and if you just focus on those, you get a distorted perception of the place. But earned media is one of the things that you really can't fake, or you can't fake a big cache of it. And I think having that really just lends itself to really breaking through, and really people just having that great emotional response and amplification of trust.
Yeah, it's like that earned media gives you that, almost like that third party neutral sort of credibility or response. I like how you described, with testimonial fatigue. I definitely think that's out there. And businesses, they'll have their customers that, oh, you can contact so and so, and they'll tell you our experience, and that, of course, you're only going to give those if they had a good experience. But really, earned media sounds like it's this neutral third party that goes out there, examines the information, says, yeah, this is real, this is credible. I'm gonna and it's a good story too, and so it boosts the credibility even more than I ever imagined. I've never really thought about the relationship between individual businesses and specific media outlets until I was recently reading some of your posts on LinkedIn. I never thought about that relationship. Um, what what types of outlets should businesses build relationships with? Because this is like this is a new concept for me, so I'm just kind of walking in blank slate. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Right. So, um, uh, when my clients that have some have worked with us for more than a decade, they always ask like, "Hey, I've interacted with this journalist in the past. Would it be a good idea to send them the release, the day before we send it over the wire?" And I'm like, "Yes, you've developed a little bit of a rapport, and continue to use that relationship, and build your own little Rolodex, and you know." Maybe you don't have a press release, but you have a really good idea. Maybe you do a little pitch to them. Um, you know, the hope is that their inbox isn't so glutted that they don't notice. But also, if you're hitting reply to an email, they're more likely to notice that, because they'll notice that they previously interacted with you. And so I think that working relationships that you have that are natural, build your own Rolodex, and continue to lean on that. And those are powerful, and just make them natural. Share ideas with them. Sometimes if you have an idea but you don't see a way that you can be the focus of it, just sharing a good idea is going to put some money in your savings account with them, that hopefully you can call on at a later time when you're pitching them an idea that you are the focus of.
And so then it sounds like really you're just, as you're building this relationship, it's not just a relationship, friendship, dialogue. It's also this idea of helping a journalist, a writer, a some type of creator in that respect do their job, because it sounds like they're always looking for new things to write.
Yeah, I don't know if you realize this, but traditional media isn't doing so great. So there's a lot of journalists and editors and writers having to do more with less. And so anything that you can do to sort of give them a little assist will be noted and appreciated later. So that it really is. We're all human nature. We like to do business, and help people that we have a relationship with. And so if you build a little bit of rapport and a little bit of a relationship with someone, you're going to find it's a lot easier to get that media attention later. We have people all the time that call us and say, we're only looking for local media. And I always tell them, good, you're about to save a lot of money, because you don't need e-releases. You don't need to pay a PR firm. This is something you can do. And basically, if you think about it, for a local business, there's probably less than a dozen people in your local market that could potentially write about you. Find out who they are. Go to your local paper, who reports on your industry. Uh, Find out their name, or if it's a couple of people, their names. Get their email address. If it's not readily available online, call and ask for it. These are not celebrities. You're not, breaking a rule asking for an email address. They're members of the media, and they're members of the community, and they want tips, and they will provide you their email address. Like I said, you are competing in the email address arena, but choose your subject carefully. Like local dry cleaner. If they cover environmental issues and they write about local businesses, local dry cleaner, and then maybe environmental, going green or something like that to get their attention, and then sort of have a pitch. You don't have to write a whole press release, just a few sentences about what you're doing that you feel is newsworthy, and what you can offer as an example company. Maybe put a great quote in there, because again, a journalist can build a whole article around an amazing quote. So if you have a ready-made quote, try to work on one and put it in there. That really stands a really good chance of a journalist hitting the trigger. If you're lucky enough to have a business magazine, business newspaper, find out who covers businesses there. Look at particular in your industry, get that email address. If there's weekly papers, you can do the same approach. If there's magazines, like we have one for Baltimore here. I think I mentioned New Jersey Magazine for my client in New Jersey. Do they cover businesses, including your industry? If so, find out who writes that. Are there radio and TV programs that occasionally spotlight businesses? Are there segments that are business spotlights or cover different things, or a talk show that covers certain issues? If so, find out who the producer or booker of that segment is, or the show, and get their email address and do the same thing, pitching them. So as you've got your little Rolodex, for most people, it's probably 4 to 6 people, but it can be as many as a dozen if you're in a large metro area. And then, just send them ideas. I tell people, try to do it at least quarterly, or as you have ideas. A really good hack is, if, maybe you grew up in a different city, or you're very familiar with another city, create Google alerts and put the names of several what you would view as competitors in that market, and see if any of them get news, and if they pop in Google News. And if they do, it's like, this could work for me. So you don't go to the journalist and say, hey, in this other market, this journalist wrote about this guy. You don't approach it like that. They're not going to feel comfortable with that. It's like stealing an idea. But what we could say is, hey, in my industry, there's been a lot of people talking about issue here, and then say, I feel like I would be a great example to discuss that. Here's a great quote, and here are some things that I've done that are relevant to that. Look forward to hearing from you. And just send those out naturally. As you have ideas, try to strive to do it quarterly. And what you'll find is you will eventually get picked up. It might be right off the bat. It could be you have to do it for 6 to 9 months before you pop. But the one thing you will notice with local media is it gets easier and easier. As a journalist writes an article and they're looking to plug in a local business as an example, if you are a good fit, you will come to front of mind. They'll look in their folders, pull you out, and reach out to you. I have people who've done this, and they're like, after 4 years, they said, we rarely send out because we get approached so often by local media that we don't have to. And it's because they've just developed a rapport, and they're at the front of mind of several journalists and writers, and they just get called out anytime there's something that they can contribute on.
Wow. Okay, that I had never thought of it in those contexts, and just that relationship, even especially at the local level, just the opportunities that are there to both help journalists, to build that relationship. That is that's incredible. Um, wow, that gives me a lot to think on. And I'm sure for the listener as well, especially if they are not familiar with press releases, with this idea of earned media, man, this has given us a lot to think on. Um, as we're wrapping up here, any takeaways you'd like to leave the audience with?
I think the biggest one is that so many people feel that PR is something that only the big companies can afford and are really deemed worthy of getting attention. And you have to remember that journalists are often given the most accolades when they bring to light a new discovery. They rarely get pats on the shoulder when they cover Google or Microsoft. But if they brought up a new tool that maybe allows you to use AI to do something that most people do every day, they will get appreciated, and people, sharing with them on social media, sending them emails of accolades. And most of those are small businesses, entrepreneurs, even mom and pops, even people with a home-based business. And so for that reason, often being small is an advantage, because journalists love to get those accolades. And if you're very well known and respected, you know why bother doing an article unless you're doing something that's just really newsworthy? And so I think that so many people have the imposter syndrome, being a small business, and sometimes just being vulnerable and honest with who you are, sharing your story, and taking chances with PR. You can definitely have a great chance of getting some media pickup.
I love that. And for everybody listening, definitely begin this process if you haven't already. Mickey, this has been wonderful. If people want to know more about you, more about e-releases, where would you like them to go?
Sure. Go to ereleases.com. All of our social media is on the lower right. Feel free to chat, call, or email the office. We only employ editors, no salespeople, no commissions. I do have a free video masterclass on how to create a winning PR strategy. It's a great place for anybody who's considering PR to start. It's based on the PR campaigns of my most successful clients. Goes through some of the ones we've already talked about, like creating a survey or study. But it's available for free, and it's at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN.
Excellent. So if you're listening, ereleases.com, and then ereleases.plan, we will drop all of those in the show notes. Make sure you check it out. Mickey, this has been phenomenal. I've learned so much, and it's just been a fun conversation. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, you're very welcome.